She blocked my driveway for 14 straight days. Fined me, harassed me, cost me $43,000 in business, until I gave her one last chance to walk away. Double quotes. She chose war. I gave her steel. Rise, fuel, real stories, real power. Asterisk. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share the video, and let's begin. Asterisk. There was a bright pink Lamborghini parked squarely in the middle of my driveway. Like my house had suddenly started offering complimentary valet service. I asked the owner to move it. She refused, claiming my driveway wasn't HOA compliant. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Apparently, blocking someone's car is now considered community education. Things escalated fast and I had to respond in a language even Karens can't ignore. No yelling, no threats, just pure horsepower. What would you do if someone treated your driveway like their personal garage? Drop your revenge ideas in the comments. I might need them for round 2. It was 6:30 in the morning. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, ready to take on a $25,000 construction project that could lock in work for the next 3 months. I'm Reed Kerr, former military engineer turned independent contractor. I keep my head down, deliver solid work, and steer clear of neighborhood nonsense. That morning should have been routine except for one glaring problem. A flaming pink Lamborghini Huracan was parked dead center in my driveway. Not halfway in, not nudging the edge, fully, unapologetically blocking my only way out, like someone had dropped a neon billboard across my exit. I stood there, stunned, wondering if this was some kind of mistake. Maybe someone was about to move it. Maybe it broke down. There had to be a logical reason why a $250,000 supercar was holding my workday hostage. I walked to the front of the house, hoping to find whoever owned this cotton candy-colored nightmare. And there she was, Deborah Knox, lounging on a front porch like royalty, sipping what had to be a $5 latte, looking relaxed enough to be on vacation. She was 39, manicured to perfection, wearing luxury workout gear that probably cost more than most people's mortgage. When she saw me coming, she didn't look guilty or even mildly inconvenienced. She looked smug, like she'd been expecting me. "Good morning, Reed," she said with a smile that made my skin crawl. "I see you've noticed my car." She spoke like we were making small talk about the weather, not like she was actively holding my entire livelihood hostage. "Morning, Deborah," I replied, keeping my tone calm and professional. "Could you please move your car? I have to get to work." She took another dainty sip and shook her head slowly, like I'd just asked for something absurd. "I'm afraid I can't do that. Reed, your driveway doesn't meet the new HOA specifications." My stomach dropped. "What new specifications?" She pointed at my driveway like it was some kind of environmental violation. 14-foot minimum, she said, ignoring the fact that my driveway had existed since the 90s. "Yours is only 13.2 feet. I'm parked here to help you remember that you need to bring your property into compliance." She said it like she was doing me a favor, like a teacher gently correcting a dim student. I took a breath and reminded myself this woman was, technically, my neighbor. I had to keep things civil. "Deborah, my house was built in 1995, long before any 14-foot rule. My driveway's been grandfathered in for nearly 30 years. She waved her hand like she was shooing a fly. "New regulations apply to everyone. Red, no exceptions. No grandfather clauses. You'll need to widen your driveway or accept limited access." The way she emphasized limited access made it crystal clear. This wasn't about compliance. It was about control, about power, about her flexing her HOA title like it gave her a throne. I told her I had a hard deadline and clients depending on me. She shrugged. "That sounds like a personal problem, Reed. Community standards come first." When I asked how long she planned to keep her car there, she smiled that cold, hollow smile again. "Until you learn your lesson." It hit me then. Reasoning with Deborah Knox was like arguing with a locked door, except the door was more reasonably and a lot less vindictive. I called the police, hoping they'd handle it professionally. An officer showed up about 20 minutes later, surveyed the scene, listened to both sides, and then dropped the bad news. "This is a civil matter between neighbors. Since it's about property access and HOA rules, there's nothing we can do unless a crime is committed." While I spoke with the officer, Deborah vanished inside, conveniently avoiding any confrontation with authority. By the time I got a taxi, I was 3.5 hours late. The $65 ride was just the final kick in the gut. Explaining to my clients that I couldn't make it because the HOA president blocked me with a pink Lamborghini, I sounded insane. I lost the job on the spot. Just like that $25,000, gone because of one woman's ego trip. When I returned home around 8 p.m., exhausted and financially wrecked, I discovered Deborah had taken it up a notch. Right where my driveway met the road, she'd installed a gleaming stainless steel sign, "Reserved Parking, HOA President." It was professional, cemented into a base, angled with precision. Not a prank, this was a message, a declaration of war. As I stood there staring at her monument to pettiness, I noticed movement in her upstairs window. Deborah was standing there, phone out, filming me like a trophy hunter. She waved, smiling like she'd just won something, and shouted loud enough for the neighborhood to hear, "Sleep well, neighbor." Tomorrow's going to be even more educational. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd have to use a tank to crush a pink Lamborghini, but that's exactly what happened with Deborah Knox, the most infamous HOA Karen in all of Texas. The story started simple. A Monday morning, I just wanted to go to work, but she decided my driveway was her new luxury parking spot. After 6 hours of trying to handle it the right way, I reached my limit. Sometimes, you have to speak the only language a Karen truly understands. Tell me where you're watching this from, because I guarantee you've never seen anything quite like what I'm about to show you. Can you guess what language I'm talking about? Your access is limited. The way she emphasized that last word made it painfully clear this wasn't about community standards. This was about power, about control, about Deborah Knox pushing people around just because she wore the HOA crown. When I told her I had a critical deadline and clients counting on me, she gave a dismissive shrug. That sounds like a personal problem. Read. Community compliance comes first. When I asked how long she planned to leave her car there, she smiled again, that cold, calculated smile. Until you learn your lesson. That was the moment I realized reasoning with Deborah Knox was like trying to talk sense into a brick wall. Except the wall would have been more reasonable and far less spiteful. So, I did the only thing I could. I pulled out my phone and called the police, hoping that maybe a uniform would bring some sanity to this situation. The officer arrived 20 minutes later, took one look at the scene, listened to both sides, and gave me the bad news I'd been dreading. This is a civil matter between neighbors. Since it's a dispute over access and HOA policies, we can't intervene unless someone commits a crime. By the time that was over, Deborah had retreated into her house, probably to avoid having to explain her behavior to an authority figure. I finally called a taxi, but by the time it arrived and I got to the job site, I was 3.5 hours late. The $65 cab fare was just insult on top of injury, trying to explain to clients that my HOA president had blocked my driveway with a bubblegum-colored Lamborghini. I sounded like a madman. I lost the contract on the spot, just like that $25,000 in income vanished because one woman decided to play dictator. When I dragged myself home around 8 p.m., exhausted and financially gutted, I saw that Deborah had made some improvements to her setup. Right at the edge of my driveway, gleaming in the fading sunlight, stood a new stainless steel sign, "Reserved Parking HOA President." It was professionally printed, mounted in concrete, aligned with military precision. This wasn't temporary. It was a message, a declaration of war. I stared at the metal monument to tyranny when something in the window above caught my eye. Deborah, standing on the second floor, phone in hand, filming me like she was documenting a historic victory. She waved, beaming, like she'd won the lottery, and called out so the whole street could hear, "Sleep well, neighbor. Tomorrow is going to be even more educational." Day 4 of her driveway occupation brought a new humiliation I hadn't seen coming. I woke up to an official-looking notice taped to my front door, "Mandatory Community Standards Meeting. Subject addressing non-compliant residents." The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. that night at Deborah's house. The fine print made it clear attendance was mandatory for anyone under HOA review. When I checked in with my neighbor Bill, he shook his head grimly. "Reed, you're getting the full Deborah Knox treatment." She did the same thing to Dr. Wilson before he finally gave up and moved. That hit me like a bucket of cold water. This wasn't about my driveway anymore. This was about turning me into an example for the entire neighborhood that evening. I walked the 3 blocks to Deborah's house, couldn't drive, thanks to my exiled truck, and found 8 other neighbors already seated in her living room. The place looked like a corporate seminar. Flip chart, PowerPoint, Deborah standing at the front in a business suit tailored for dominance. She greeted me with that fake, over-rehearsed smile. "Reed, so glad you could join us. Please sit right up front." The chair she indicated was dead center, facing the screen. Perfect for maximum humiliation. I caught sympathetic glances from a few neighbors, people who clearly knew what was going on but were too afraid to speak out. Slide after slide targeted me like 1,000 paper-cut zoom-ins of my slightly overgrown lawn, diagrams of my truck, and one absurd chart claiming my mailbox lowered property values by 0.5%. I wasn't a neighbor anymore. I was a case study in her little HOA cult session. Then came the personal attack segment. Deborah turned to the group, beaming. "Reed will serve as our primary case study tonight. Reed, would you care to share your experience with community compliance? It was a trap meant to force a confession or paint me as defensive and uncooperative." I declined, politely. She nodded, feigning compassion. "I understand. This must be difficult, but community cooperation is vital for all of us." Several neighbors shifted in their seats. 3 quietly slipped out. Then came the final blow-up. Re-education program. 4 mandatory HOA classes at $100 each. Miss one, that's a $500 penalty. Attendance required. I walked home in the dark, and it hit me. Deborah wasn't just trying to control my property. She wanted to break me down, strip away my dignity, my finances, and my reputation, until the only option left was to leave. The next morning, a new low. I looked outside and saw not just the pink Lambo but a navy blue BMW parked behind it, forming a complete blockade across my driveway. She brought in backup. Her sidewalk setup had also evolved, a pop-up canopy folding, table loaded with electronics, and what looked like a cooler full of snacks. When I approached to ask about the second car, Deborah didn't even look up from her laptop. "Oh, that's Jennifer's car. She's helping me with the community safety initiative." I asked what kind of safety initiative involved blocking a homeowner's driveway. Deborah's eyes lit up with that predatory sparkle. "We're documenting potential threats to neighborhood security. Your military background and equipment have raised some concerns." It landed like a sucker punch. She was weaponizing my service history, turning my legally owned, demilitarized tank into an accusation. Within hours, I started getting phone calls. People I barely knew were asking questions. "Is it true you have weapons? Is that a real tank? Should we be worried?" Some sounded curious, others terrified. Deborah had planted the seed, and now the panic was growing. By afternoon, I noticed parents steering their kids away from my property. Neighbors who used to wave now avoided eye contact that night. I sat in my garage with Bill, both of us staring at the canvas-covered shape of my M60 tank. "She's not gonna stop," Bill said softly. "She's going to keep pushing until you snap or give her an excuse to call the cops." I asked what I should do. His answer was quiet but firm. "Fight back, not with rules or meetings. That's her battlefield. You've got to respond. The only way someone like Deborah Knox understands." I hesitated. "If I use the tank, I'll probably get arrested." Bill shook his head. "Not if you do it right. Not if you have witnesses. Not if everyone sees that you tried everything else first, and she left you no choice." When he left, I pulled off the cover and ran my hands over the tank's surface. Fully restored, demilitarized, no weapons. But still, 60 tons of a statement that some lines should never be crossed. That night brought the final straw. An email went out to every household in Oakwood Hills: "Urgent resident safety alert." Deborah had attached photos of my house taken from multiple angles, cropped, enhanced, twisted just enough to make my garage look ominous, like I was hiding weapons of war. It was psychological warfare. I woke up to dozens of messages, some concerned, some accusing. Even Mrs. Henderson, 3 blocks away, called to ask if I was stockpiling arms. Mr. Foster wanted to know if I was mentally stable because of my military past. But the worst call came from Sarah, the mother of an 8-year-old girl, who just last month had invited me to see her science project. She said, her voice shaking, "I'm sorry, but until this gets resolved, I don't think it's safe for my daughter to come over anymore. Asterisk. I think it's best if Emma stays away from your house." The fear in her voice said everything. Deborah's campaign was working like a well-oiled machine, turning me into the neighborhood outcast, not someone to respect, someone to avoid. My business, already battered by missed deadlines and cancelled contracts, was now teetering on the edge of collapse. 3 more clients dropped me that week, all citing the same concern. Image. One call in particular cut deep. A homeowner I was scheduled to renovate a kitchen for said it straight. "Look, Reed, I'm sure you're a good guy, but my wife saw that HOA email about military gear and erratic behavior. We just can't have that kind of drama tied to our renovation. I hope you understand." Oh, I understood perfectly. Deborah wasn't just sabotaging my current jobs. She was burying my professional reputation under a mountain of fear and lies. In construction, word spreads fast. Once you're labeled as unstable, it follows you like a shadow. A power trip turned scorched earth campaign. At that point, she'd cost me nearly $6,000 in lost contracts, daily cab fares, HOA fines, and parking tickets. And when I tried to dispute the charges, I discovered the review board was filled with her relatives and cronies rendering appeals, a complete farce. Each day that passed drained money I didn't have and burned bridges I'd spent years building. By day 14, Deborah's sidewalk circus had evolved into something disturbingly permanent. She upgraded to a larger canopy, brought out professional-grade chairs, a charging station, even a mini-fridge hooked up to an extension cord from her house. She was holding sidewalk conferences, now real meetings with visitors coming, discussing papers, working on laptops, then leaving satisfied. When I asked Bill what he thought she was doing, his answer made my blood run cold. "She's building a case. Documentation, witness accounts, whatever she can use to make you look unstable. She's prepping for the endgame." Then came the hand-delivered bombshell, a community safety review. They wanted to inspect my home, evaluate my mental health, charge me $2,700 for the privilege, and if I refused, immediate escalation to legal authorities with the possibility of forced removal from the neighborhood. That night, I sat in my garage with the M60's engine manual laid across the workbench, checking every bolt and wire like I was back in uniform. Engine smooth, hydraulics responsive, tracks clean, paperwork impeccable, registration, insurance, modification certificates, everything by the book. Bill found me around 9 p.m. He saw what I was doing, gave a nod like a man who'd, "If you've seen this coming, you've made your decision." It wasn't a question. "She's gone too far," I said. "And tomorrow, this ends one way or another." She's had 14 days to be reasonable, 14 days to compromise, to be a neighbor. Instead, she chose war. As Bill left, I climbed into the M60 and turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, a mechanical heartbeat that reminded me of a simpler time when enemies didn't hide behind HOA bylaws and weaponized gossip. Through the periscope, I could see Deborah's setup glowing under the street. Her pink Lamborghini looked like a neon target, daring me to flinch. I whispered to no one in particular, "You picked the wrong neighbor, Deborah. Tomorrow, you'll learn what happens when you push someone past the edge." I woke at 5:30 a.m. on day 15, feeling clearer than I had in weeks. There's a strange serenity that comes with certainty. No more options, no more waiting, just action. I drank my coffee, ate a quiet breakfast, and checked the forecast. Clear skies, ideal conditions. From my kitchen window I could already see Deborah in positions, setting up her sidewalk fortress with military efficiency. Her Lamborghini, as usual, sat blocking my driveway like a $280,000 insult at 6:45. I stepped outside. This would be the final conversation. She looked up from her laptop and flashed the same smug grin she'd worn for 2 weeks, like she was starring in her own twisted reality show. "Good morning, Reed," she sang, ready for another day of community compliance education. Her voice dripped with mockery. She really thought she'd broken me, that I'd just keep taking it. "Deborah," I said calmly, "I need to get to work. I'm asking one last time, move your car, end this." She laughed, a real genuine laugh. "Oh, Reed, you still don't get it, do you? I'm not moving anything until you show some respect for HOA authority. Your property needs to be brought into full compliance." She gestured toward her phone. It was live streaming. Our war had become her entertainment. That was the final confirmation. Deborah Knox had left reality behind. She wasn't just harassing me, she was performing it. I turned directly to her camera and spoke, loud and clear. "I've spent 14 days trying to fix this like a decent human being. I offered to modify my property, pay for inspections, follow reasonable standards. You chose harassment, you chose sabotage, you chose slander." Her smile wavered. "You had 2 weeks to cooperate, Deborah. Instead, you picked a fight. Now you're going to see what that costs." I turned and walked toward my garage. She shouted, "Where are you going, Reed? You can't just walk away from me." But I didn't look back. The garage door lifted slowly, revealing the canvas-covered beast beneath. I peeled the tarp away with deliberate care. The M60 stood gleaming in the morning light. 60 tons of unshakable resolve. I pressed the ignition. The engine roared to life with a sound that echoed across the block like rolling thunder. Windows flew open. Phones appeared on porches. The silence broke. I caught Bill across the street, arms folded, watching with quiet approval. As I rolled the tank forward, the entire neighborhood held its breath. Deborah's smirk disappeared the second she heard the engine. She backed away from her setup, fumbling with her laptop. She yelled, "He's gone insane. Someone call 911. Still, she refused to move the car. Like giving ground would be a greater loss than what was coming. I stopped the M60 10 feet from the Lamborghini and spoke through the external speaker, double quotes, "Ms. Knox, this is your final chance to remove your vehicle. End this peacefully." A response, "You can't intimidate me. I know my rights." She was still putting on a show for the livestream, still clinging to the idea that she was untouchable. I began counting down: 30, 29, 28. Each second drained the color from her face. 15, 14. She turned, scanning the crowd. No help came. The neighbors who'd once avoided me now watched in silence. 5, 4, 3, 2, and then she broke. Deborah turned and ran, abandoning the car and her little command center, shouting, "Stop him, somebody stop him." But it was far too late. I shifted the M60 into gear and said the words that ended 2 weeks of abuse. "Lesson time, Karen." The tank rolled forward. From inside, the impact felt underwhelming, just vibrations and resistance. But outside, metal screamed. The Lambo folded like tissue. 4 minutes later, it was rubble. Through the periscope, I watched the hood collapse in slow motion. Her pink crown jewel flattened beneath steel treads. The paint peeled in long ribbons, streaking the tracks with neon shame. I wasn't angry. I wasn't reckless. I was methodical, controlled, deliberate. Every foot of progress was filmed by the same neighbors who'd watched me suffer in silence. Phones up, eyes wide. No one stopped me, no one stepped in, because deep down they all knew this was justice. What began in shocked silence turned into murmurs of approval, then applause, and by the time I was halfway through turning Deborah's Lamborghini into a $280,000 pancake, I knew I wasn't the villain in this story. Asterisk. I could hear actual cheering from several directions. Finally, someone shouted, "About time somebody stood up to her." Another voice chimed in, "That's how you handle a neighborhood bully." Bill Parker's voice carried above the rest. The support from neighbors, people who'd been too intimidated to speak up during Deborah's reign, confirmed what I'd suspected all along. I wasn't her only victim. I was just the first one to say, "Enough." She screamed about lawsuits. She wailed about status. She kept filming like she still had control. But the moment her car vanished under steel, so did her power. What struck me most wasn't her panic, it was that even in total defeat, her thoughts still circled money, optics, and legal retaliation. Not once did she reflect on the cruelty that brought us here. No recognition, no remorse. The police arrived just as I finished the final passes over what had once been the rear of the Lamborghini. 2 patrol cars, lights on, sirens off. That told me the dispatcher already knew this. Wasn't your average 911 call. 2 officers stepped out. One was a grizzled sergeant who'd clearly seen it all. The other looked like a rookie still learning how to keep his hands from shaking. I climbed out of the tank slowly, hands visible, paperwork in hand. I'd prepared for this. Officers, I said calmly, approaching with steady steps. Here's everything you'll need. I handed over my tank's legal registration and road certification. My property deed showing the driveway was unquestionably mine. My phone loaded with 14 days of photo and video evidence documenting the blockade, the harassment, the escalation. The sergeant flipped through it all with practiced focus. The rookie took statements from witnesses, of which there were plenty. I watched the sergeant's eyes narrow, then widen, as he pieced together the timeline. This wasn't about property destruction anymore. This was something deeper. Deborah tried her old playbook. Officers, he's clearly mentally unstable. He destroyed my car. He threatened me with military hardware. But when they asked her about blocking my driveway, her story unraveled faster than a cheap sweater. I was enforcing HOA compliance. She said, too proud to realize she'd just admitted to illegal behavior. The sergeant's voice stayed neutral, but firm. Ma'am, do you have any legal authority to block access to private property as part of HOA enforcement? No, she said, blinking. And why didn't you move the car when asked? Because he needed to learn his lesson. That was all it took. It was clear Deborah had no legal standing, just ego and intimidation. The conclusion came fast. I had a legal right to access my property. Deborah had blocked it for 2 straight weeks. My tank was street legal and documented. My efforts to resolve the issue peacefully were well recorded, and now I had a dozen witnesses who'd seen me warn her repeatedly before taking action. Sergeant gave his final assessment like a man who'd refereed to many HOA wars. Ma'am, you chose to park your vehicle in a way that blocked legal access to private property. The property owner has the right to remove obstacles, regardless of their value. Then came the second blow. Her insurance didn't cover damages caused while illegally parked on someone else's land. But it's a $280,000 car, she gasped, as if the price tag entitled her to immunity. The younger officer shook his head, almost apologetic. Ma'am, if you'd parked a $10,000 car there, the result would have been the same. Value doesn't override the law. Deborah's rage gave way to something new, fear, real, shaking fear, the kind that hits when a paper empire begins to collapse. Just as the officers wrapped up, another car rolled into the cul-de-sac, a silver sedan I recognized. Robert Chen, one of the senior members of the HOA board. He stepped out, looked at the wreckage, and made a beeline for me. Mr. Kerr, he said, extending a hand. We need to talk. His tone wasn't angry, just ... resolved. There have been concerns about Ms. Knox's leadership for a while, he continued. This might be the catalyst we needed. 48 hours later, the emergency HOA meeting was standing room only. The community center hadn't been this full since the Christmas party. Robert Chen stood at the front, face grave. We're here to address the conduct of our current HOA president, and whether recent events warrant her removal. 5 board members sat behind a folding table, Deborah's usual seat in the middle. Empty. She'd been suspended pending review. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't grandstand. I presented the facts. 14 days of blocked driveway photos, the bogus violations, the escalating fines, the $43,000 in lost business, the $1,500 in nonsense HOA penalties, and my daily parking costs $210 just to use my own truck. I tried everything, I told them. Conversation, mediation, compliance. She escalated every step. Then my neighbors spoke one by one. They described her reign of fear, the wrong shade of curtains, the wrong basketball hoop placement, the wrong flowers. 7 people in all, each one with their own Deborah horror story. Then came the final nail. Dr. Wilson. He no longer lived in Oakwood Hills because Deborah had driven him out. He detailed the harassment, the threats, the forced sale of his home, and how much it had cost him in moving expenses and lost equity. By the time Deborah showed up, the room had already turned. She looked ... hollow, her power suit replaced by something wrinkled and desperate. The confident mask gone. She fumbled through half-coherent arguments. I was protecting community standards, she said. What standard requires blocking a driveway for 2 weeks? Someone asked. She had no answer. Reed's military background made him dangerous, she claimed, but the board already had proof the M60 was fully demilitarized and road legal. Their deliberation took less than 20 minutes. Deborah Knox was removed from the HOA presidency immediately. Banned from holding any HOA position for 2 years. Every rule change she made in the last 6 months rescinded. Most satisfying of all, she was ordered to personally reimburse me the entire $43,000 in lost business. She had 90 days, or the HOA would sue her. The aftermath came like a landslide. She couldn't afford a new Lamborghini, her house listed within 6 weeks, her husband gone filed for separation before the sign even hit the lawn. Her lawsuits against me for emotional distress and property damage dismissed her savings, devoured by legal fees. Even local stores avoided her. The woman who once ruled Oakwood Hills couldn't show her face without someone whispering that's the one from the tank video. As for me, business exploded. The tank story went viral in the construction community. I got calls from all over. Are you the guy who crushed a Lambo? We need someone who doesn't fold under pressure. You don't back down, we like that. I made more in the next 2 months than I had the entire previous year. My reputation rebuilt and bulletproof. The community changed to Bill. Parker was elected HOA president in a platform of reason, fairness, and neighborly respect. His first act, a zero-tolerance policy on harassment. The climate shifted almost overnight. Instead of spying on each other, neighbors started helping each other, and the property values started climbing for the first time in years. 6 months later, while installing a custom deck, a client shook my hand and said, "We need someone who can think outside the box. Someone decisive." That tank story that sealed it. I laughed. Creative. Problem-solving, huh? My M60 now sits in an expanded garage bay, polished and spotless. A plaque above it reads, "Problem-solving tool, use only when absolutely necessary." Neighborhood kids love it, adults respect it, and everyone remembers the day Oakwood Hills learned that kindness is not weakness and that silence is not consent. People ask me if I regret crushing the Lamborghini. My answer never changes. I regret waiting 14 days. Some people only understand one language, power, and sometimes the only way to shut down a bully is to roll up in 60 tons of American steel and redefine the meaning of compliance. The pink paint still streaking the treads. A permanent reminder that every human being has the right to leave their own driveway ... whenever they damn well please. Asterisk, asterisk, some people only understand power, and sometimes the only way to deal with a bully is to let the tank do the talking. Subscribe to Rise Fuel for more stories where justice rolls in heaven. Like if you've ever had a neighbor from hell, comment, what would you have done? This is Rise Fuel. Fuel your story. Fire your fight.